Thank you. I have a brief summary about our efforts on the long-range plan recently, and so I just thought I'd give a quick update to you all and to the community about where we are. As the board's already aware, we have one community member, Mr. Sutherland, who we are involved in litigation with. He did appeal the court's last decision, which prolonged the litigation and prevented us from going to market to sell the bonds and begin construction. So now the next step will be that the case will be heard by a Colorado appellate court, and a timeline for that hearing has not been set yet. Since we cannot sell bonds and begin the construction process while litigation is pending, beginning construction on new facilities and improvements to existing facilities is likely to be delayed by yet another year. We have not made that decision final, but that is looking very much like what's going to happen. As you will recall, we are already delayed 1 year due to this litigation, and now we anticipate this delay will probably extend yet another year. So what that means is, and instead of opening the new middle school, high schools in Wellington and at the Prospect site in 2020, which was the original plan, it's now likely we will not be opening those buildings until 2022. And the opening of the new Southeast Elementary School and permanent addition to Zach Elementary had already been delayed to 2019. And now with another year, we're looking at 2020 for those construction projects as well. Should it be resolved quickly, should the litigation be resolved quickly in the next month or so, it might be possible that we could get back on our 1 year delay schedule, but it's looking unlikely as each month goes by. So we'll keep the board and the community apprised of any changes as they may happen. And there's been a question as to whether we will keep the taxes that we have collected because we're not sure if we can use them or not in the timeline that we need to be able to use them. We do not have an answer on that at this point, but I want you to know that we'll keep you apprised, and we will have to make a decision on that relatively soon as to whether what has to happen with the money that we have already collected. So we're working with our attorneys on that issue. In the meantime, we are still managing the growth in our schools the best we can. So for this coming school year now, we've placed another modular classroom outside of Wellington Middle School. If you've gone by and seen, that modular has had to go in the front yard right in the field because all of the space around the building on the other sides is already taken with modulars. I think I am correct that this will be the year when they have more students in modulars outside their building than they have inside. So we already have 560 students enrolled at Wellington as of the 4th. That's an increase of 56 students over last year's count and an increase of 7 over the projection. So we made a healthy projection for growth in that area, and so far they're beating their projection by about 7 as of today. The principal also believes that we could go up quite a bit, possibly as high as 575 in the next couple weeks. Also, as of last week, there were over 600 students enrolled at iStone, which is an increase of 15 students over our projection, and our projection was already a projection to grow at iStone. So they're beating our projections in both of those schools. So we will continue to look at all the areas of growth in that regional growth for possible modulars for next year. And of course that's going to have an impact on our budget as we don't have a funding source at this time for those modulars. So we'll be working out the finances of figuring out how we can continue to put temporary classrooms in place in the regions that are growing so quickly. We have begun the process of selecting an architecture firm to design the new middle school, high school buildings, and we're mirroring the selection process similar to what the state recommends. So we have begun the interview process, and we'll be bringing a recommendation. Staff will be bringing one to me, and then I'll be sharing that recommendation with you. We're anticipating sometime later this fall when we will nail down the architecture firm that we're going to work with. We are also going to be looking closely at enrollment numbers. As you know, our enrollment comes in officially on October 1, and then it takes seemingly to the community forever for the state to finalize their numbers and count halves of kindergarten kids and 3/4 of high school kids and all of the complications that they are so picky about when they're looking at how many students they're going to fund us for. Keep in mind the October 1 count is for the purpose of money. It is the way states decide how much money we get, so they're counting so carefully. But we certainly will have a good estimate as of the first week of October, how our enrollment's looking compared to our projections in the different regions of the district. And that's been one of the things that's been the most interesting over the last few years, is we're seeing such regional differences in enrollment. Some areas exploding, others flattening out, or maybe even shrinking a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see this year. So we'll be working hard on getting the best numbers we can as quickly as possible. In November, as a board, you should expect to see enrollment report from staff. I have also asked for a third-party firm to conduct an independent 5-year projection analysis to coordinate with our demographer. We have a good demographer in district, but we also know that there's statewide trends. He watches all those statewide trends too. I just feel more comfortable, and I hope he does too, to have a second opinion of yet another firm from outside the area to take a stab as well at what our projections might look like. I think that I think all demographers seem to, at least for our northern Colorado area, seem to be agreeing that although there may be dips and wobbles as the enrollment goes up, when you look long-term in the life of a new school building, for example, there's no question the numbers are up. Will be up. There is still thousands of homes being built within our district boundaries. And then I wanted to say that the delay in the construction timeline has not delayed or will not delay our work on designing the instructional programming that's going to go into these schools. And before we even started the long-range planning process, we've been talking about our secondary, post-secondary workforce readiness, as we call it, preparation for students, and working on instructional programming and innovation for that age of our students. And so we haven't slowed down. We're not waiting for new buildings to continue that work. As a matter of fact, we're excited that some of the things we believe are going to be great, we can start implementing in our new high schools even before in our current high schools, even before these new schools are built. And that work will certainly inform our work as we are designing the new buildings and the instructional programming. So we do not feel that this has slowed us down in terms of working with our community and designing what we think our high schoolers need. The December Board of Ed meeting is where we have preliminary plans to bring back to you our best thinking at that time on innovative educational programming for secondary students. So we're targeting December Board of Ed to have a good, healthy discussion about where we're headed with that. And that's all I have.
Board members, questions? Christoph.
So last year, one of the school visits I did was Wellington Middle School, and it was somewhat shocking to see a school like that in our district, kind of, kids pouring out of every corner and literally in broom closets. And I think that actually is not even an exaggeration. There were broom closets being used. And when you indicate that we added another modular that's going in the front yard and they're losing space for athletics and who knows what else, I guess the question that comes to mind under the circumstances, do we have a plan for what happens as they continue to grow? Say 2 years from now, is there anything we're looking at to do? I mean, I don't assume we could add another modular, or are we going to? I don't know. Are there choice kids that get knocked out, or are we going to get to the point where community kids aren't going to be able to even go to that school?
Yes, Director Fevre, we're prepped for one more up there. Yeah, Scott and I have been up and have visited with Dr. Duran prior to this one being set, and typically when we prep for one, we'll prep for two because it's more cost effective to do it ahead of time. So we're ready to look for another one at such point. So that's maybe not a super long-term plan, but it'll get us a little farther down the road.
And do you have information on how many choice kids are in Wellington? Because it's my impression that those are all local kids. Yeah.
And do restrooms and gymnasiums keep up with the expansion?
That's a great point. That's part of the issue. And lockers right now are becoming very difficult. We're going to get a little bit more creative with how even, it sounds as simple as, but lockers where, you know, we have double lockers now, we have triples is what they're called. They're more like an athletic locker that we're looking at because space is being definitely challenged in the hallways.
And sorry, one last follow-up. Are there other schools that I haven't visited that are in similar straits, or is Wellington the worst case? Are we getting in these situations elsewhere as well?
I think Wellington is the worst. And Eystone is filling up quite quickly, so they're the next worried. That's fair to say, I think.
I'm sorry, Carolyn, did you have one? And then Rob.
I just had a comment, and I think we had talked about this earlier, Sandra, that they have 5 tracks for first grade out there this year, and so there are kids that are going to be coming up through that system. I mean, they were really, you know, squeezed in out there. I don't know if anybody's ever visited out there, but the footprint that Wellington Middle School is on, I believe, is only 4 acres. So there's not a lot of room to move around and navigate out there. There's not any parking. There's nothing. I mean, it's really tight. And I agree with you, Christoph, that kids quite literally are pouring out of the closets out there. They are using every little bit of space that they have.
Rob.
So I wanted to follow up. I hear that we have room for another modular. That's fine. Given that we're now talking about not having a new school open there at the earliest until 2022, does one more modular cover the space between now and then? And if not, do we have a plan, or when will we have a plan about what to do with those kids?
We will have to bring back to you a plan for another year out after the next modular goes in. I will tell you that if you think back just a mere, maybe it's been 2 years now at the most, when we were looking at the long-range plan to start with, we said that in the interim we could overflow the Wellington Middle School kids into Eystone. Do you remember we talked about that? And now Eystone's full. Exactly. You're right. It's not working. So the growth is here. It's fast, and it doesn't appear to be slowing down at all. So we will keep doing the best we can with that, but we'll bring you a plan for where the modulars go. The basic idea would be to put another pad out in that field and put another 2 in there. That's almost, if you look at the footprint, that's the only place they can go. Most likely that's what staff will bring you, but I'll wait for them to give you.
So the deal fundamentally is we'll just keep adding modulars until there's no more room, at least on that property.
Yeah.
Is what it amounts to. We don't have any alternate ideas about. Okay, all right. That's really sad. And I know it's not your fault, but it's really sad.
Other board members' comments and questions? Okay, I'm just going to chime in here because you know what? Everywhere I go in PSD, I get the question, why is it that one individual can override the will of the voters who voted to approve the bond last November, narrowly, admittedly, but how is it that one individual can do this? People are frustrated. They're frustrated at the legal costs. They're frustrated at the delays. But let me tell you what else they should be frustrated about, because it's not just a matter of the legal costs. The legal costs, while unfortunately large, are also one of the smaller costs that are involved with these continued delays. We continue to experience rising interest rates, which when you talk about this kind of money, when we're going to have to be putting these bonds out on the market, are going to be a very expensive piece of this. We continue to have rising construction costs in our area. The overall, one individual who is appealing legal decisions that so far have all been in Poudre School District's favor, and I want to emphasize that every single legal decision, and I can't even count the numbers so far, have been in Poudre School District's favor. I just think that's really important for people to know. But because of these continued appeals, the costs of this one individual to our district continue to rise, and I think people just need to be aware of that. And it's not the choice of anybody up here that this is a problem. We're trying to resolve it, but we're kind of stuck, and so we hope that it'll get better. Nate, I'm sorry.
Well, I would like to say that although I am concerned about the costs and the delays, and they're real, in our system of government, anyone has the right to challenge something like this. And while I disagree on the merits, I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to demonize people for using what's available. We don't demonize people for using a grievance process that's set up in our employee agreement to try to get questions answered. And even though the district has prevailed every step of the way, the reality is there's a process set up and someone has decided to use that process. And whether we agree or disagree with it, that's why those processes are there. So I disagree that it's appropriate to demonize someone even if we disagree with their decision.